What's up, Vikings fans? Welcome back to another edition of Viking Spin. I'm your host, Jason, and we're coming at you today with a preview here of training camp and the roster position battles, and ultimately a prediction for the 53-man roster. So which guys are going to make it, who's going to get cut, who can possibly go to the practice squad, an encompassing prediction like that. As well as some team news to get to, which we're going to do first here. So the Vikings opened up training camp yesterday, and Mike Zimmer had a few announcements. Those announcements were related to injuries. Unfortunately, defensive end Tayshawn Bauer, who was away from the team, suffered a torn Achilles. Bauer was looking probably at competing for a backup defensive end spot. Personally, I think he was probably getting overtaken this camp by Afadi Odenigbo, but he was still in the mix. Unfortunately for him, the Achilles tear is probably going to end his season. Because it happened away from the team, they actually had to put him on the non-football injury list. So that's where he's at going forward there. Also on the non-football injury list is Shamar Stephen. It was an undisclosed injury, but Mike Zimmer said it's nothing serious, that Stephen will be returning to training camp soon, so nothing really to worry about there. He had a few announcements for the PUP list. As predicted, Mike Hughes is going to be on the pup here to start training camp. They're hoping to get him back for week 1. I've heard some whispers that he may not be back. He may miss the first few games, so maybe week 3 or week 4 is a more realistic spot to expect Hughes back. Also, David Morgan is on the PUP, although they're saying that his injury, you'll probably see him back well before Mike Hughes, so they're hoping to get Morgan back. I think sometime during the preseason, so we'll have to watch that. It'd be nice to get him in there for some training camp practices too, but we'll have to monitor Morgan's situation going forward. And then also backup receiver Brandon Zylstra, who is in a competition to make the team at the bottom end of the roster. This definitely doesn't help his chances starting off there, so we'll have to see what happens with Zylstra going forward, and what that means for the position battles of wide receivers. So that's what's going on with the team news. Also, the Vikings did work out a couple of free agent cornerbacks, because the situation with Holton Hill's suspension now being 8 games, that kind of cut into the Vikings' depth. When you add Hughes's injury to the mix, and it becomes more pressing for depth, because the Vikings have obviously Rhodes and Waynes starting on the outside. Mackenzie Alexander is going to man the slot, but behind him, there's not a lot of experience. So, you have rookie 7th round pick Chris Boyd, Craig James, an undrafted free agent from last season that was the 6th cornerback on the roster last year, and then some other UDFAs that came in. So the Vikings took a look and worked out veteran free agents Orlando Scandrick, and yesterday they worked out Morris Claiborne. So Scandrick is more of a slot corner, and Claiborne is more of an outside corner. So interesting to see the Vikings looking at either spot there. With the thinking, I think the flexibility that Mackenzie Alexander has to play inside or out, if you can add a depth corner really at either spot, you're going to improve the depth of the cornerback position. So both of those guys are experienced. They can both play pretty decently, so I would expect the Vikings to add one of these guys in the very near future as they get further into training camp. Just to get them up to speed in case they have to play a little bit early on if there's an injury. So that's where they're at with the state of the roster right now. Um, just to bring you up to date, in case you missed it, they did release Rock Thomas. They've added another running back in D'Angelo Henderson, who was a draft pick of Denver a couple of years back, so he knows the system. The Gary Kubiak is implemented here with Kevin Stefanski. So let's move on then to that kind of segues into position battles. Let's move on to that. We'll start at the quarterback position. Obviously, Kirk Cousins is a starter, but there's a battle behind him for the backup spot. UDFA Jake Browning probably seems destined for the practice squad. I wouldn't put him in contention for QB2. That's being battled out right now between Kyle Sloter and Sean Mannion. Now, according to reports, really neither one of them has separated themselves very much from each other. So I expect this battle to go through training camp and probably won't be decided until the end of the preseason. So that's where Sloter and Mannion are at. I do expect, because they're not really separating each other from each other much, and neither one of them has a ton of game experience in a regular season, that the Vikings might keep both of these guys on the roster and go with 3 quarterbacks, just because if one of them is the backup and they had to get in there for whatever reason and weren't quite cutting it, they might want to sub that guy out and give another guy a shot just to see if he can give the team a spark in a situation like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go with 3 quarterbacks here. So that's what I'm going to make as my final prediction, that the Vikings keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. Moving on to the running back position battles, obviously Dalvin Cook is the unquestioned starter. Behind him, Alexander Mattison, a 3rd-round draft pick this season, is starting to take hold of the RB2 spot. He was getting the 2nd most reps throughout mini camps and OTAs, and as they started training camp yesterday. So Madison, I would say, is going to be the number 2 because he is the change of pace back. He's the bigger, stronger, goal line, short yardage type of guy, who is really good in the fact that he is also a 3-down back, so he can pass block, he can catch, so a very valuable piece, I think, to the puzzle this year for the Vikings will be Madison. Behind him, you have Amir Abdullah, newly signed D'Angelo Henderson, and Mike Boone, all competing for the 3rd running back spot. In each of those guys, you have more of a copy of Dalvin Cook, so it's the faster, shiftier, pass-catching type of back. That's basically, a Cook replacement if you needed one. Amir Abdullah has been getting some run at kick returns in camp, and then D'Angelo Henderson, after they brought him in, was catching punts too. So these guys have some special teams value. I know Boone has been in the mix there, getting reps as a return man too. So that's got to play itself out for the battle for the RB3 spot. The Vikings had 4 halfbacks last season on the roster, and I think they're going to do that again, especially with the added emphasis on running the ball. So I'm going to go with Cook, Madison, Abdullah, and D'Angelo Henderson making the 53-man roster, with Mike Boone headed to the practice squad. So that would be 2 practice squad spots. One going to Browning and one going to Boone. And there's 10, so we'll get to the rest. The fullback position is next. Obviously, C.J. Ham has got that locked up. I think there's no question about that. But Curry Blossomgame has showed some promise as a UDFA, and I think they're going to put him on the practice squad. But Ham will be the one that makes it, and they're only going to roster 1 fullback. So we're up to 8 players now total. Moving on to the wide receivers, I think they're going to keep 5. The reason being, I think they're going to have 4 running backs and 4 tight ends. So, with the bigger emphasis on 2 tight end sets and running the ball, I think you've got obviously Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen are your starters. The third wide receiver spot, the reps have been split right now between Chad Beebe and Jordan Taylor. So I think those guys are going to be 3 and 4 easily. And then you've got Dylan Mitchell, who's been rising out of the rest of the pack because you've got Mitchell, Treadwell, Jeff Bedett, Brandon Zylstra, who's now on the PUP, Davion Davis, a UDFA, and then another UDFA in Alexander Hollins. But Dylan Mitchell is the one that we keep hearing about. He's also been taking punt and return reps, so he's the one that's been standing out as a receiver, and I think he's going to grab that 5th receiver spot because the Vikings, they have some young players that they may want to put on the practice squad. Maybe a couple of those young guys, maybe like the 7th round rookie, BC Johnson. He might be one that they stash on the practice squad. Maybe they want to give Jeff Bedett another year on the practice squad. So that would mean that there's only going to be that 1 spot left. And I think Laquan Treadwell is the odd man out here. He hasn't, reports haven't had him really standing out. And he really had to step it up if he was going to make the team this year. I don't think he's going to. I think they're going to go with Dylan Mitchell as the 5th and final receiver spot there. And I will give 2 practice squad spots there. We'll give that to BC Johnson and Jeff Bedett, who I think they're gonna want to stick around because of his speed. So we now we have, let's see. So we've got 3 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 1 fullback, and 5 receivers. So that brings us up to 13 players right now. Moving on to the tight ends, I think they're going to keep 4 out of this group. Obviously, Kyle Rudolph is the incumbent starter, and he is tight end number 1. And you've got Irv Smith Jr., the 2nd round draft pick, has been getting the tight end 2 reps. Once David Morgan comes off the PUP, he is the designated blocking tight end, if you will. So I think he makes it there as tight end 3. And then Tyler Conklin, the 2nd-year player, 5th round draft pick from a year ago, who started to see the field more as the season wore on late last season, has been having an impressive camp so far. They really like him. They've been talking very highly of him, and I think with the emphasis on 2 tight end sets, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that they're going to keep 4 tight ends on the roster. So I have Kyle Rudolph, Irv Smith Jr., David Morgan, and Tyler Conklin all making the team, with Cole Hikutini and Brandon Dillon not making the cut. So moving on to the offensive line, we have the starters from left to right have been this way in camp. It's been Riley Reif at left tackle, Pat Elflein at left guard, 1st round draft pick Garrett Bradbury at center, free agent signee Josh Klein at right guard, and returning 2nd-year pro Brian O'Neill at right tackle. The Vikings re-signed Brett Jones to back up at center. They drafted Drew Samia in the 4th round to add depth at guard. I think those 2 guys are going to make it. And then you've got some interesting stuff going on at offensive tackle. Aviante Collins is back. He missed last season due to an injury a biceps injury in preseason. But he's back, and he's been taking the 2nd team left tackle reps. And Rashad Hill has been the swing tackle the last couple of years. But Aviante Collins, if you remember from 2017, was the 4th tackle, and he got some run in their goal line packages
when they brought in an extra tackle there. And he has interestingly been getting the left tackle reps. And Rashad Hill being a swing tackle, he usually does better on the left side. So it's interesting to see that they have Collins over there. So my thinking is that they want Collins to see if he can replace Hill. If they can upgrade from Hill at the swing tackle spot with Collins, who also has some position flexibility to play guard if need be. That's going to be my bold prediction there, that Collins knocks off Hill, and they only keep 8 offensive linemen because they're going to keep 9 defensive linemen. So that's what I have. I have Jones, Sami, and Collins being backups, and sending Oli Udo to the practice squad as a developmental tackle. And we'll swing back around to see if any of the other reserve offensive linemen, the young reserve offensive linemen, might have a chance at the practice squad, like Storm Norton, players like that. But I don't think Dozier is going to make the roster, and I don't think Isadora will make the roster either. I think they are going to go with these guys. So that's my offensive line prediction. Moving on to the defensive line, you've got your starters in Everson Griffin and Daniil Hunter manning the starting defensive end spots, and then Shamar Stephan has been taking the first team reps at 3 tech. He's going to be a run stuffer, early down guy. As the starter there next to Linval Joseph, who is the starting nose tackle. Behind those guys, you've got Stephen Weatherly as your defensive end 3, and I think Afadi Odenigbo takes over the defensive end 4 role now with Tayshawn Bauer going out for the year. Behind Stephan and Joseph at 3 tech, Jalen Holmes, a converted defensive end, is going to give them the lighter, quicker player there that they want as a pass rushing 3 tech. And I think Jaleel Johnson is now settling into the backup nose tackle spot. He took the starting reps when Joseph was out, so he appears to be the second team guy at nose tackle. Now, I see them keeping an extra defensive lineman. This is a really deep group, and Hercules Mataafa has been impressing as both a pass rushing 3 tech with the position flexibility to play at defensive end. So with him turning some heads there, and in his second season, I think has a little bit of an edge. I'm going to give a practice squad spot though to Armand Watts, the 6th round pick, who they have been playing at both nose tackle and 3 tech, as a backup. So I think he's going to carve out a practice squad spot for himself. And we'll take a look and see if maybe Ade Aruna might be able to carve out a spot there. So the Vikings do have some other young defensive line depth that's competing. And he's a guy that they drafted a year ago that maybe has a shot at the practice squad. But those are the 9 guys that I have on the defensive line. So let's take a look at where we're at now. So let's see, we got 7, 8, 13, 17, 25, plus 9. So that's 34 spots that we're up to right now. I'm gonna say that they're gonna keep 6 linebackers. So we've got Ben Gedeon, Eric Hendricks, and Anthony Barr as the starting 3 in the base 4-3 defense. According to reports and interviews, that doesn't really seem like it's going to change. Eric Wilson is going to be the top reserve off the bench. They played him at all 3 linebacker spots. So I think he's going to be the top reserve. Cameron Smith, the draft pick in the 5th round, another guy that they've been moving around there to play all 3 spots. I think his versatility will help him grab a roster spot. And Devontae Downs, I think, is a guy they drafted last year that they like at middle linebacker. He was rostered last year, got a little special teams run, He's another year removed from an injury that he had in college. I think he's going to be even better this year. And with Kentrell Brothers' contract expiring after this season and him not really being a guy that they relied on as a depth player, only a guy that they used on special teams, I think that Downs is going to knock him off. And that's who they're going to go with for the 6 linebackers. Now moving on to cornerback, and this is a complicated one because of the suspension of Colton Hill, who at this point, there's a possibility that either he doesn't make the team or they hang on to him and he comes back later in the season, maybe replaces, a running back or a D lineman or linebacker, depending on, or just replaces an existing cornerback on the roster. We'll have to see. But to start the year, I think the Vikings are going to go in there with obviously Xavier Rhodes and Trey Waynes are starting outside corners. Mackenzie Alexander is going to start the year as a nickel corner. Mike Hughes is going to be rostered because I don't think he's going to miss too much time. I'd say he'll be back by week 4 at the latest, so they're not going to put him on. They're not going to keep him on the PUP, which would, I think, require him to miss at least 6 games. So I don't think they're going to do that with him. I do think they're going to add a veteran cornerback, whether it's Orlando Scandrick or Morris Claiborne. Who knows, maybe even Captain Marlin if they decide to look at him. I think they are definitely interested in a veteran cornerback, as evidenced by the workouts with Scandrick and Claiborne. So I think, XYZ veteran will be the 5th guy there. And I think Chris Boyd, the 7th round pick, carves out a role for himself as the 6th cornerback, with Craig James going to the practice squad. So I think they're going to go with 6 there. And let's see, so now that brings us to, we had 34 after the D linemen, we had 40 after the linebackers, and now plus 6 corners, we're up to 46. So we've got room for 7 more spots on the roster. We're going to keep here, in my predictions, I've got them keeping 4 safeties. It's going to be Harrison Smith and Anthony Harris as the obvious starters. J-Ron Curse will be the top safety off the bench, who also plays as the big nickel in certain packages. And Marcus Epps, I have making it as the 4th safety. He's also been getting some slot corner reps, which shows some position versatility. With the Vikings in need of cornerback depth, I think Epps gets it over Deron Smith, who's also battling there for the 4th spot as a safety. So there's your 4 safeties there. So that brings us to 50 players, and then obviously you're going to need 3 specialists. And the 3 specialists that I've got: Dan Bailey. They didn't bring in any competition for him. Outside of yesterday, where he had a rough day, he had been having a very solid spring through OTAs and mini camps, and had been very consistent. So hopefully that one day was just a hiccup. But it looks like that Bailey's going to be the guy, unless he gets into a real slump and they wind up signing another free agent. Matt Weiler has been holding on to the punter spot. And I know the Vikings worked out some other punters, but they didn't wind up signing them. So his holding must be getting better. His punting must be solid. So I've got him making it. And then the long snapper, now with the government's decision on what to do with players that are serving in the military, working out for Austin Cutting to where he'll be able to play this season. So they're going to work around that and let him fulfill his Air Force obligation around his football schedule. So I have Austin Cutting making the cut over Kevin McDermott. I think the Vikings want to save a little cap space. McDermott's contract was going to be over $1 million headed into next season and close to $1 million this season. Plus, Cutting has all of his fingers, so I guess that's a plus too. But I mean, when you draft a long snapper in the 7th round, I think you are wanting that guy to make the roster. So there's your 53. And then the practice squad we had, let's see, so far we allotted Jake Browning, Mike Boone, Kari Blossingame, Olabisi Johnson, Jeff Badette, Oli Udo, Armin Watts, Craig James. So that's 8 spots there. The Vikings would have room for 2 more. As we take a look around, maybe they would be able to keep an offensive lineman like John Kenoy, who I hear that they like. He's a backup center. They could decide, that they want to keep another linebacker. Maybe Richard Cuyette, who was also there last season. I could see him making it as well. So if we gave those to Kenoy and Cuyette, that would make 10. But different things can happen there with the practice squad. But generally, what I wanted to do was to get an idea of the 53-man roster. So there you have it. Those are my predictions for the 53-man roster. I thank you guys for tuning in to another edition of Viking Spin. Don't forget to encourage others to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We also post articles for Purple PTSD, and I do post some articles as well for the Viking Horn message board, so be sure to check us out there as well. And we'll see you next time. Take care.